Welcome back. Today we're going to look at arrays in ActionScript. Most variables you've seen so far have stored only a single value. So a Boolean variable contains only true or false. A string variable contains character text. And there's the integer type, int, which stores only integers. And then there's a number type that we've seen so far. But arrays are different in that they can store multiple values, and also those values can be of different types, as we'll see shortly. So let's get to the code, and I've created a class called arrays, and within my arrays constructor I've got all my code. So I'm not using any functions today, just putting all the code in the constructor. So let's have a look. Very first thing I've got here is this tray statement, which just says array1. So I've got a couple of these. We've got array1 here, and I've got array2 down here, and array3 down here. Now, we will be looking at 3 arrays, but I put the tray statements in so that in the output of the code is clearer. Okay, let's have a look at array1. So this is where we're declaring an array. So declare means creating or setting the type of a variable. So we've got here var, which we always have. Then we have my array, so that's my variable name. And the type, in this case, is simply just array with a capital A. And here, so this is actually the declaration. Here is when I create a new instance of an array. So this is when I actually create the array in memory. Okay, so we've got this array here. And as I said, arrays can store multiple objects. So what I'm doing here is just storing some strings, which are names of people. So, and to store those names, I'm using the push method. The push method adds whatever you have in brackets to the array, to the end of the array. Okay, so you can imagine it's like a stack of items, and you start off down the bottom, and when you push things onto an array, they keep on being added to the end of the array. Okay, so Bob is pushed onto the array first, and then Frank, and then Sam. So we know that Bob, Frank, and Sam, they're strings. They're strings because they have the quotes around them. In our next line, line 13 here, we're actually adding a number type, 1. So simply the value 1, but it's not a string, it's a number type. And on line 14, we're pushing a Boolean value. So we're adding true to the end of our array. So arrays allow you to do that. You can mix and match types. However, you may want to avoid doing that because when you're working with many arrays, if you're putting different values, value types in the arrays, it can be hard to keep track of what's in the array, and it's a very good way of introducing bugs because some of your code may only work with strings or numbers, and if you've got different types of variables within your array, then you can have problems. So it's not a good idea to mix and match types, to have strings, numbers, and booleans in the one array. However, we're demonstrating that we can do that. We've declared our array, we've created the new instance of the array, and we've pushed these values. So we've added these values to the end of the array, one by one. Okay, in this line, line 16, we're saying in text, length of the array is, and then we're using the plus. Remember, when you see a plus after a string, it means concatenation. So you're certainly not adding strings together numerically. You're actually just joining a string together into a greater string. Length of the array is plus sign, which means concatenation, my array dot. Remember, the dot indicates that what follows is a property. My array dot length. Okay, so my array dot length will return the length of the array. So an important thing about arrays start with the index value of 0. And we'll see how that comes into play next. So we're getting the length of the array here, and these lines of code here are going to show us each element of the array. We use the word element to indicate what's in the array, but basically element means each value in the array. So we're using this index notation, which is simply just a number which indicates the place in the array that we want to look at. Arrays start at 0, my array 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 5 trace statements there, and we're adding 5 items. That's all. I've commented out the rest of the code for now. So let's run that, Control Enter, and check the output. Okay, down here we can see array 1, so that's just some text I added to make things clearer. Length for the array is 5, so we added 5 items to the array. And when we traced out array with square brackets and 0 within the square brackets, which was the first element of the array, we get Bob, and then Frank, and then Sam, and then 1, and then true. Okay, so just going back to our code. So just remember that you can refer to elements in array by number. Let's look at array 2 now. So I'm going to comment out array 1, just so the output is less confusing. Okay, we're looking at array 2 now. So I've got a trace statement here, which just says array 2. But notice this backslash n. So that's, be careful, it's not a forward slash, it's a backslash n. So the backslash n indicates a new line. So when we put backslash n within the trace statement, it's going to insert a new line. And that can be helpful when you're creating a lot of output in the console. Having those extra lines in there can make your output clearer. Okay, we're declaring another array here, which is called myArray2, and this time we're doing something a bit different to what we did above. So we're still saying myArray2 type array equals new array, but inside the brackets now we put the values Bob, Frank, and Sam. So let's just scroll up to our commented out code. Up here, this line here, we didn't put any values within the brackets there, but we added the values using the push statement. But a shorthand way of both declaring the array and adding values is simply to do what we've done here and put the values within the array, within the array brackets when you're declaring the array. Okay, next thing we've got here. So rather than using the myArray and then within the square brackets putting a number to indicate the index within the array, we're using a for each loop. So for each loop is just a very nice way of looping through an array from the start index from 0 to the length of the array. It's a good way of going through the array and displaying all the values within the array. So for each, let's break this down a bit. For each var, var, value. So we're declaring a variable called value in myArray2, and then we're tracing out value. So this for each loop is looping one by one, element by element through the myArray2. And this value is being changed every time the loop is processed. So this value is changing every time as we go through the loop. So let's just save this and see the output. Okay, now notice very carefully we've got a new line here. So we've got a new blank line. So that's a result of our \n creating a new line. Then we have the text array2 and then Bob, Frank and Sam. So we can see that our for each loop is working. Okay, let's look at our final array. I'll just comment out array2 and scroll down to array3. And save it all again. Okay, now we're declaring myArray3 with the array type again. However, we've got an even more shorthand way of declaring and creating this array and populating it with values. So just before in array2 we had equals new array, and within the brackets we had Bob, Frank and Sam. Now with arrays we can actually remove this new array, these two keywords, we can remove those and just have the square brackets. Okay, so as you can see, an even more concise way of declaring and creating an array. And on the next 3 lines we've got another loop, but this one is different to the for each loop that we just saw. It's just a for loop, but it's different to the for loop that we saw in earlier videos when we were looking at the while, the do while and the for loop. This for loop is slightly different. We're declaring a variable called index, which changes as we loop through myArray3. Different to the for each loop, when we were using the for each loop and looping through the array, we were getting each element or value within the array. Here, down here, we're actually just getting the index value. So the index value is the position of the elements within the array. So starting with 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, actually it only goes up to 3 in this case. Let's have a look at this trace statement. So we output the index, and then we've just got a semicolon and a space, and then we've got myArray3, and in square brackets we place the index. So this code here, myArray3 with the index, is very similar to our very first lot of code up here, myArray3. So instead of actually putting in the value 0 or 1, 2, 3 here, we're just putting in index, because index, as we're looping through the array, it gets updated from 0, 1, 2. Okay, we've saved this, so I'll just run it now and we'll see the result. Okay, you can see array3, and we've got the index value as we're looping through the array, 0, 1, 2, and then we've got the values as well. So experiment with this code, run it a few times, change the values, and best of luck learning about arrays.